Undeclared wars are commonplace. Tragically, our country engages in preemptive war, otherwise known as aggression, with no complaints from the American people. Sadly, we have become accustomed to the illegitimate use of force by government. To develop a truly free society, the issue of initiating force must be understood and rejected. What if Jefferson was right, that government, governed least, governs best? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's hour of danger is now? Is Bobby Bones, and I will always stand up for freedom, liberty, sound economic policies, and most of all, you, the American people. I love you. I hope you enjoy. And God bless America. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another episode of the Patriot Report. I'm your host, Bobby Bones, here at Liberty One Studios in beautiful Greenville, South Carolina, and I want to welcome you to this brand new episode. So I want to go over the economy, trade, and everything that's going on with Greenland. I mean, there's so much stuff flying around every day that it is hard to keep up with everything. And so that's why I'm here to kind of break through and to give a perspective that you're not going to hear on CNN, Fox News, or Newsmax. So one thing I want to go over first is the economy. And this episode is going to be geared more towards economics and my perspective on what the United States should do and what Europe should do regarding Greenland or just in general. So first thing I want to do is let's go over the markets, right? How did gold, silver, Bitcoin, the Dow react to Trump's threats against Greenland and everything that's gone on over the past week? So looking at the dollar has gotten hammered over the past week, down roughly 1%, landing at 98.50, right? Now you have to understand that since Liberation Day, look, we could put up the chart, right? So there it is, landed at negative roughly 1%, 98.50, like I said. And, the dollar has lost already roughly 10% against other currencies around the world. And what that means is that the United States doesn't have the same purchasing power that it did prior to Trump's Liberation Day. Now, if you remember when Trump first did Liberation Day, he was saying how this is going to destroy the Chinese yuan, this is going to destroy their economy. They need us to sell. And I'm going to get into what happened to the yuan and what happened with China being able to sell their products after the tariff. So I'm going to go into that in a little bit. But second, I want to go into gold. Looking at gold, let's put up the chart. Gold is up 3.40%, almost 3.5%, landing at $4,762.40, right? Gold originally was leading the way on the inflation de-dollarization trade. But look who's coming up now who has really been shining bright. And I said this was going to happen about 4 or 5 months ago. Look at silver. Let's put up that chart. Silver is up just in the past week, 10.25%, right? 10.25%, landing at $94.38 per ounce. And this has been an incredible trade. If you had listened to me when I started this program now over a year ago, and you bought some silver, because again, I was telling my listeners and viewers, look, if you can't afford gold, right, then go buy silver, right? It is the next best thing, right? And of course, if you can't buy gold, physical gold or physical silver, because those prices are a little bit too rich for your blood, you have the gold and silver mining stocks. Let's look at the GDX. Put up the chart. The GDX is up almost 3%, 2.99%, landing at $101.28 per share, right? Again, you're not just buying the company, you're also buying the future gold that's in the ground. Let's look at another junior miner. Let's look at the GDXJ. The GDXJ on the week is up 4.43%, so almost 4.5%, landing at $134.74, right? This is another way to buy gold if you can't afford $4,800 gold, right? You can get in with these stocks at a fraction of the price and have just as much bang for your buck, right? Let's look at Pan American Silver, or PAAS. Pan American Silver over the past week is up almost 1/3%, landing at $57.21. These stocks have outperformed just about everything on the Dow over the past year. We're talking Tesla, we're talking NVIDIA, all the high flyers, right? The Mag 7. These particular stocks that I was out there beating the drum, telling people, when the analysts on TV were saying, dump these stocks, these are sells, don't buy these, I was telling my viewers and listeners, hey, you got to get in, man, while the getting's good. And let me tell you something. With everything that I see the Federal Reserve and government doing, right, fiscal and monetary policies, it is telling me to load up on these stocks, right? So let's look at how did Bitcoin react, right? Because again, a lot of my crypto bros and friends who are into crypto, you know, their whole spiel, sales pitch is that Bitcoin is digital gold, right? Well, how did Bitcoin react to all the news going on? Bitcoin is down another 6.5% almost, landing at $89,442.95. Now, you have to understand, when Trump became president, he was the crypto president, right? And, you know, they were predicting the people trying to push Bitcoin. Oh, this is going to go to 250,000, 300,000. It's going to hit $1 million, going to the moon. You know, they all had their laser eyes out and all of this. And I was saying that Bitcoin was completely overbought. I seen the top, and, you know, I said it's got a long way down from here. And Bitcoin has been sliding down literally, basically for the past year. Bitcoin is down. So it is not digital gold. There is no physical properties that Bitcoin has that matches real gold, right? Real gold is a commodity, right? It's used in industry. It's used in every cell phone, computers, space, all sorts of technologies, right? And gold is real money. By definition, gold is money, right? And so although the people who created Bitcoin did a good job of marketing it to make it look like Bitcoin in a picture, in reality, all Bitcoin is a series of numbers that people go out gambling on. Now, and I think the part of the crypto investors that are going to get wiped out the most, and this is a prediction I'm going to put out there, are the people who borrowed against their Bitcoin. I have a feeling that when the economy fully rolls over, you're going to see a lot of people who borrowed against their Bitcoin defaulting. And that's going to be a massive, this is going to ripple throughout the economy when that happens, because a lot of people borrowed against their Bitcoin, and a lot of people who bought near the top are way underwater, right? So how do you pay back on your Bitcoin if your Bitcoin is down, you know, $30,000 from the top, right? If you bought it at 120,000 and you're at 90, under 90, right? How are you going to pay back that loan? Are you going to pay it back? Or are you just going to be like, oh, well, So there's going to be a lot of defaults in that area. That's where I see a big chink in that chain. So now I want to switch gears from talking about crypto, gold, and silver to now talking about the Dow and the S&P. Let's put up the chart for the Dow. The Dow is down over 2% on the week, landing at 48,535.75, right? And let's look at the S&P. Let's put up that chart, right? The S&P landed at, is down 2.38%, landing at 6,811, right, and 59 cents. Again, the Dow and the S&P have, although when Trump goes out there and says, oh, they have had, what, I don't know what he says. He says something like 52 highs, meaning basically every week we've hit a new high. But when you price both in gold, right, which is real money, right? You don't want to price it in dollars. You want to price it in gold, right? You see that both have actually lost value per ounce. Finally, let's look at the NASDAQ. Let's put up that chart. It is down almost 3%, right? 2.97 to be exact, landing at 23,029.78, right? So all of the markets have been hit, including Bitcoin. So it's clear that the real winners in the past week, right, has been gold and silver. And actually, if you go all the way back to January 1st, right, the start of the year, gold and silver have, and mining stocks have outperformed the Dow, Bitcoin, NASDAQ, S&P. They've outperformed real estate, I mean, this is going to be another spectacular year. Why? Because of the terrible monetary and fiscal policies coming out of the Federal Reserve and out of the federal government, right? So now I want to talk about Greenland and Trump threatening 10% tariffs on February 1st. And then he says he's going to go up to 25% if he doesn't get what he wants, right? So let's get into that. So now you have Trump. Now I have to put this out there that I already made a video on this whole thing. I did this video already. And what happened was kind of why I'm dressed like this, because I wasn't prepared to do another video. But what happened was when I loaded it to my computer, it looked like I videoed it on Mars. I mean, the video was such poor quality that here I am redoing it. And so I says, you know what? I'm not going to put out a bad quality video. I'm just going to go out. I'm going to go down into my studio and just do another video. And so that's kind of why I'm dressed like this. I'm kind of on the fly, and I look like a chooch. I know I do. So anyway, in the time that I did that video and in the time that I'm doing this video, Trump already went to Europe, right? He went to Davos, right? He's over there with the billionaires and all the people that control everything on the planet, basically, the real world leaders. He went over there. Now, literally within 24 hours before Trump left, he gave a press conference. And in the press conference, he said, look, if I have to take Greenland with military force, that's what we're going to do, right? Well, now, fast forward to right now, literally less than 24 hours later, in front of them. Now, mind you, now he's in front of these same leaders. Now he says, well, we're not going to use military force, right? So then he says, he comes out after meeting with the leaders and says, oh, by the way, he tells, he put out a truth or a tweet, or whatever you call it, and says, oh, tariffs are off because we have a we're putting together a framework of a deal. Well, he said before he left that if they don't give him Greenland, right, he's going to tariff them on February 1st. And if they don't respond to that, the 10% tariffs go to 25%. And then if they don't respond to that, he's going to attack them with the military. He was very clear on that less than 24 hours ago. Well, you know what Trump did? He does what he does best. He did the taco, right? And if you don't know what taco means, taco represents Trump always chickens out. And that's exactly what he did. Now, is there some framework being established that, you think Denmark is just going to give us Greenland? Who knows? I don't know, right? I don't know if there even is a framework. I don't know again, the word framework can mean anything. I don't know what it actually means, right? Because with Trump, it could mean anything. The word framework is not exactly, hey, we're making a contract, or these are the parameters of the deal. He didn't say anything. It was very vague. And with Trump, it could literally mean anything, right? But, how can you, again, with Trump, he throws everything at the wall, knowing that the American people cannot keep up with everything. And it stresses people out. It freaks people out, right? And he does it on purpose, right? Because he has no respect for the American people, right? Instead of just being honest on what he's going to do, he just says a bunch of things and hopes that something sticks, right? And my guess is that he thought that if he threatened hard enough at home, that when he got to Davos, that they would all check it out and say, okay, Trump, please take Greenland. We don't want to fight you. But I think what happened was, because what I found out was late last night, Scott Bessent came out and said, he made a comment, which I was talking about in my previous video, but after that video. So anyway, Scott Bessent said, well, I think it would, he goes, why would Europe not buy our treasuries? That doesn't even make any sense. He was like, he said this kind of flippantly, but I think what happened was, I think when he got to Europe, I think the European leaders were saying, hey, look, Europe owns $8 trillion worth of U.S. treasuries. Europe collectively owns more treasuries, okay? The NATO countries own more treasuries than any other entity on planet Earth, right? And Trump knows, Scott Bessent knows, Trump's team understands, as bad as this team is economically, they understand that if Trump were to invade Greenland, right, all Europe has to do without even firing a single shot is just stop buying treasuries. Just stop buying treasuries. And that would cripple the dollar. They don't even have to sell the $8 trillion in treasuries that they have. All they have to do is stop buying treasuries. And now I think that Europe should stop buying treasuries anyway. I think all countries should stop buying treasuries, or at least slow it down, because this is the thing you have to understand. And a lot of Americans have it backwards, especially Trump. Trump believes that we hold the cards, that because we have the dollar, that we have the strength. But what Trump and those Americans don't understand is what gives the dollar that power. It's not the military. A lot of people in the Republican Party especially, and some Democrats, believe, well, because we have a strong military, that gives us a strong dollar, when actually it's in reverse. It's the dollar that gives us the strong military. If you can't pay your military, everything falls apart. Because think about it. If we have a treasury sale and the government needs to raise money because the government doesn't collect enough in taxes, right? And there are no buyers of that debt, then what happens is the Federal Reserve has to then monetize the debt. Or President Trump and Congress can raise taxes. Now, Trump doesn't want to raise taxes. Nobody wants to raise taxes. So we rely on foreigners to basically vendor finance our debt. Because what happens is, this is the cycle that happens. Foreigners buy our, I'm going to explain how this happens. Foreigners buy our treasuries, right? Then what we do is we take that new money that we created out of thin air, right? Because it's not backed by anything. And then we go on a shopping spree. We buy new military equipment, we buy food, we buy products, we buy TVs, right? We buy all sorts of things, right? With all this new money, things that the rest of the world creates. So what happens is they vendor finance our way of life. They loan us the money, and then we take that money to go buy their stuff. And if you were following me during the COVID era, right, I was saying back then when Trump was handing out those COVID checks, I was saying that we might as well just give the check straight to the Bank of China, because that's where those checks are going to end up, right? Because we had to borrow all that money. We printed that money up. And where did the money land? It landed in China. It landed in Europe. It landed in South America. Only a small fraction actually lands in our own country, right? And this is the problem. This is the problem with running deficits, right? And, you know, you have to think that, you know, how is Social Security funded? How is the War Department funded, or Medicaid or Medicare, right? They don't collect enough taxes for any of this stuff, right? So we have to, every year, or now it's like every few months, Congress has to raise the debt ceiling, and then the Federal Reserve creates treasuries, and then we auction off those treasuries. Well, what's happened in the past week since Trump was threatening to invade Greenland? The 10-year yield started going up, way up. Interest rates started going way up on the long end. And that's exactly what I said was going to happen a few months ago, right? When Trump was pressuring the Fed to lower short-term rates. I said, what you're going to do is you're going to end up making long-term rates go way up. And so I think it's foolish for Europe or Asia or any other country to sit there and keep propping up the dollar. I think the dollar's days are done. I think the de-dollarization trade is only going to excel as time goes on, because let's say even if Trump doesn't invade Greenland and doesn't do tariffs, right? Those countries are now on notice that at any point an American president can come in and use the very military that they helped subsidize, because again, when they buy our treasuries, they are subsidizing our way of life, right? Americans are able to live beyond our means because of the status of the dollar being the world's reserve currency, right? You think that they're going to want to prop up a currency that's going to build a military that's going to go after them, right? Because if you could go after your friends, you go after anybody. And that's the problem with this whole story. And in my opinion, the real losers are the American people, right? Who have their whole entire savings and everything locked up in dollars, hoping that every time America puts out an auction of treasuries, that we have foreign buyers out there. Because here's the deal. Not if, but when we run out of the greater fool, right? Because I call it the greater fools who buy these treasuries, what's going to happen is that your savings is going to erode even faster. Your retirements are going to erode, right? Although the nominal price will go up, you won't be able to buy anything with it. What good is a check from the government if you can't buy anything with that check? That's the destruction of inflation. Now, I'm only telling you if they stop buying treasuries. I'm not even talking about what if they start selling the treasuries that they have and all those dollars start flowing back to our country. What do you think's going to happen, right? Inflation's going to go ballistic. Here's another thing that most Americans don't understand. Most dollar bills that are created, right, are first of all created on a computer, right? So they're not even physical dollars, but we export most of our inflation around the world, right? We export the biggest thing we export actually are dollar bills. It's currency. And if they start selling those treasuries and those dollars start coming back home, where do you think your retirement's going? Where do you think prices are going? And that's why I think it's so important for Americans to get out of the dollar and get into safe assets like gold, silver, platinum, right? Real assets, because I think the dollar's days are numbered. And you look, we were headed this way anyway. What Trump did was Trump only sped up the process with the Greenland and everything that he's doing. He has, all he did was facilitate and speed up the process. That's my perspective on that. And now we're going to go into the next thing. And again, I believe that Europe would be better off, dumping the dollar. Let me tell you what happened with China. Because I mentioned China before. I'm going to get into that right now. Going back to Trump's Liberation Day, Trump said that this is going to be bad for the yuan. It's going to be great for the dollar. China needs us to sell their product. Well, what has happened since China? Since Trump's Liberation Day? Well, China's exports are actually up 5.5%, landing at $3.77 trillion, right, worth of stuff that they are now exporting. And they did exactly what I said they would do. Instead of China wasting their money buying our treasuries and selling us stuff cheaply, they started selling stuff to other countries around the world. And guess what? What do you know? Other countries wanted the stuff that China made. And guess what? Now we have emboldened other countries like Brazil, Argentina, countries in Europe, right? France, Germany. They are all now trading more than ever with China. And because China says, hey, you know what, America, if you don't want my stuff, the stuff that we produce, we'll sell it to other people. Now, when Trump talks about the trade deficit falling, because it did fall, not because we are producing more stuff and shipping out more stuff, it fell because we don't import as much. Why aren't we importing as much? Because the dollar got hit, right? We lost 10%. With our currency versus other currencies, right? We lost our purchasing power, right? Less countries are stepping up to the plate to buy our treasuries. So then you say, well, then who's buying the treasuries? It's the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve started a couple of months ago, QE all over again, right? They are now monetizing the debt. Well, guess what? It takes time for that inflation to drill down into consumer goods, but you feel it. You feel the prices going up. So who won? Who is winning, right? China is selling more stuff than ever, right, to other countries that don't threaten them, right? We have higher prices and less stuff to buy, right? Who is better off? Who won that, right? And guess what? Europe's going to do the same thing. Europe is going to end up saying, hey, you know what? You don't want our wine. You don't want our cheese. You don't want our cars. we'll just sell them to other people. You don't think people in Brazil wouldn't like a BMW? You don't think that people in Japan wouldn't like a nice bottle of French wine or something? I mean, we have to stop. Look, America, this is the thing. We have been brainwashed by especially in economics on all the TV stations, Fox Business, CNBC, Bloomberg. Those Keynesian economists believe that the hard part is going out and buying a bunch of stuff. They're like, oh, because of the strength of the dollar, we could go out and outbid other countries. And Americans think that's the tough part. When in all reality, the tough part is actually manufacturing the products and shipping them out. That's the hard part. People all around the world want stuff. Demand is always there. The question is, who is going to outbid and give the best price? Because that's who wins. And for a long time, because of the dollar's reserve currency, the dollar has been able to outbid other countries. Well, now that game is reversing. And as the dollar loses strength against other currencies, other countries will be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor and the labor of others, and we will have to do without. And that's what's coming down the pike for the American economy. Truth of the matter is that our country has real structural issues, right, within it. And this didn't just start now, right? Although Trump's name probably came up 30 or 40 times in this one quick episode, he did not create this problem, but he definitely added to it. He's just an extension of the past 55, 60 years of bad fiscal and monetary policy, right? What president doesn't want 0% interest rates, right? What government doesn't want to give away free stuff, right? This is the problem with the structural issues. A lot of the structural issues go back to voting, right? The fact that you have people that become one-issue voters, right? And their one issue is, hey, are you going to protect my program? Are you going to give me free stuff? This is the problem. Everybody wants their program, but nobody wants to pay for the program, right? They want to always cut somebody else's program, but never their own. And this is the problem, right, in this country. And we have really bad structural issues. And unless Republicans and Democrats get serious about the deficit, protecting the dollar, right? We have a Federal Reserve that does the right thing. We are going to continue to have a lower standard of living in this country. And again, I can't hammer home enough that it is not Europe ripping us off, but rather we are ripping Europe off, right? Because at the end of the day, all they end up with is a bunch of paper, right, that keeps losing value. We end up with the stuff, right? That's, again, you go to work. Think about it, right? When you get your check, whether if you get a Social Security check or you get a paycheck, the goal isn't the check. The goal is what you can buy with the check, right? The stuff. And the fact of the matter is, the hard part is not spending that money. The hard part is even Richard Nixon, when he took us off the gold standard, promised the world and the American people this would be temporary. Who knew it would last over 50 years, right? And so I think that we've run out of chain, and that's why we literally are we are drowning. The amount of debt that we are accumulating now is so high, so extreme, that the world has to cut us off. There is no way in God's creation that we're going to be able to pay this back. And they know it. And so another issue that is coming up is the Supreme Court is getting ready to rule on Trump's tariffs, right? And I believe that it should be a 9-0, right, against Trump. But here's the truth about the Supreme Court. And again, I'm not just saying this because it's mostly Republicans on the court. The Supreme Court has been political my entire life, whether if it was mostly Democrats or mostly Republican, right? And the truth of the matter is, regardless which side controls the courts are constantly doing unconstitutional things, right? Look at all the taxes that the Supreme Court has allowed, you can go all the way back to the unconstitutional federal income tax, right? But this court case, now you look at Obamacare, right? Look at Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, right? Look at all the programs and things that are out there, right? When you look at the Bill of Rights, the founders were very clear on what you had rights to, right? Now, here's the thing, right? If the founders thought that somebody had a right to, let's say, education or housing or anything, don't you think the founders would have put it? What do you think? These were just stupid people, right? They understood the power of government, and they did not want government involved in every aspect of our lives, right? But the founders never imagined that the people would demand so much government in this country. And so let's talk about the Constitution. The Constitution is very clear on where the power resides to tax on the federal level. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the Constitution states very clearly that the taxing and spending who holds the purse is Congress, right? And they actually control tariffs as well. Also, if you look at Article 1, Section 10, Clause 2, it is very clear that Congress is where the power and authority resides in placing tariffs. So these tariffs that Trump have put, I've said this from the beginning. I said this all the way back in Trump's first term. I said it during the Biden administration. I am nonpartisan on this. The power to tariff and tax does not reside in one man. And the reason why the founders did it that way was because they did not want one person to have so much power, right? That's why you have different branches of government. And if Congress wanted to make tariffs and tax or tariffs, even the House of Representatives would need the president to sign it into law, right? They just can't wave a magic wand, but that's where the power resides, is with Congress, and then the president signs it into law. Well, what Trump did, and Biden, was skip over the Constitution. And here's the thing. Where was the Supreme Court over the past decade? And another thing I want to point out, and it just shows how crooked the Supreme Court is. Whether if it was Trump in office or Biden, the Supreme Court, never even took up the case, never did anything. They never, even Congress, they've been asleep. They allowed both presidents to usurp power. They usurped power from Congress, right? And, people like me going out there and explaining to people why this is illegal, we just get thumbed at or whatever. They're like, oh, Bobby, who cares? Well, it does matter, because you don't want one person to have the power to tax, right? You want your representative taxed without representation, right? You want to be able to hold your congressmen accountable for the taxes that they levy on you, right? And when you have one guy, a president who doesn't even have reelection, putting in taxes, or another guy who's half dead, asleep every day in the chair, doesn't even, again, you can't hold those people accountable. Congress, you could hold accountable. These people, you can't. So, again, it's very clear in the Constitution. And the fact of the matter is that Americans pay the tax. And here's the proof. Because even Trump's own lawyers in the Supreme Court have argued, anybody can look this up. They argued that if the Supreme Court unwinds Trump's tariffs, then the federal government has to pay back that money to the American people who paid out those taxes, right? So right there, it tells you who pays the tax. And so that's why I'm going to end it with this. The program is that Europe, let's say if Trump, comes back home tonight, tomorrow, and has a temper tantrum and says, that's it, I'm going to put 10% tariffs on Europe, their reaction should not be to tariff back. That's the wrong reaction. What Europe should do is say, okay, we're not going to punish our own people because, again, if Europe puts tariffs on American goods, it's the European citizens that are going to get punished. What they need to do is say, okay, for every 1% you put on us, we're going to subtract 2% worth of treasuries we're going to buy at the next sale, going forward into perpetuity. And that would be a clear shot across the bow to Trump to knock it off. And that's where this is going. So anyway, I really appreciate everybody for showing up here to the party here with me, Bobby Bones. And I want to just go over a few things before I end out this video. Like I stated earlier, I did a video and the video came out terrible. I mean, it looked like I shot it on Mars, which I don't understand because I bought really high quality equipment. And it was a little depressing, to be honest with you, to put in all that work, because a lot of YouTubers that you see out there, they have writers and producers and, all of this apparatus. And, I don't. It's just, it's me and my equipment, and I'm learning as I go. And because I believe I have something to offer viewers and listeners that you're not going to hear on other stations, right? When I talked about treasuries and how trade works and all of this stuff, you don't hear that on other networks, right? You just don't. Because I don't come at it from a Keynesian economic perspective. I come at it from an Austrian economic perspective, a free market perspective, right? And sound economic policy perspective, right? What the founders believed in and what they tried to instill in our country. And unfortunately, we have walked away from a lot of those economic values that they once held. Now, also you notice I'm not live, right? And I'm not live because, again, I got to learn new programs and I got to do certain things so that I don't look like it's a hostage video, right? Because, again, I don't want to put out low quality stuff, right? I want to put out the best videos that I can. So, look, it's going to take me a couple of weeks, right? Because I run businesses and I'm still keeping this show going and everything. But I also have to learn all new programs as well. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And I will announce when I'm able to go live again on YouTube. My engagement went way up going live. So that's where we're going with this show. Will I do videos like this still? Yeah, sure. Especially if I have more time, right? But I want to thank all of you Patriots listeners and viewers to checking out the Liberty Report. And I want you to know that regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, I am always going to stand up for liberty, truth, freedom, and of course, economic sound policies. I want you to stay strong, my fellow Patriots. God bless, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.